Welcome to the next episode of the ResiBuild podcast, Constructive Conversations. Today we're joined by Matt Corr, the Quality Manager of Sapphire Balconies, and we're going to be deep diving into how does the golden thread apply in a manufacturing scenario, delivering the right things for life safety to the construction industry.
Could you start off by just introducing a bit about who you are and what your role is and what your background is?
Yeah, okay, so my name's Matt Corr. I'm obviously Head of Quality in Sapphire. I've been at Sapphire for almost 5 years now. My background is I've been in quality for well over 20 years, various different industries, including automotive, motorsport, high precision engineering. So a wide background within the manufacturing areas.
So Passport is the balcony quality app we use at Sapphire.
Yes.
Obviously you've been the fundamental cog in the creation of the direction and fulfillment of that app. Talk us through the systems and the principles it works and why it's critical to our QA process.
Well, as a subcontract manufacturing business, we need to ensure we've got the controls in place that all the processes that go into actually creating our product are under control. So we developed an app-based system called Passport. This is something that's using an App-innate platform. It's something that's downloadable onto the devices of the people who are doing the actual work on our balconies, and that can be from the original steelwork right through to the manufacturing of the balcony, and then through the actual install stages as well. And it covers all the important checks to validate that they're being done by competent trained staff, that all the steps are being done correctly, and there's nothing being missed out. And it gives us full traceability of what's going on for every single balcony that goes through onto the side of a building.
So it sounds very much like a digital golden thread of information at Sapphire balcony level, if you like.
Yes.
Tell us about how the principles of Passport align with the direction and the requirement of the golden thread from the new Building Safety Act and so on.
Well, it's giving the full traceability, looking from a safety perspective, that every element that goes into building those balconies, which essentially at the end of the day are on the facade of a building, and they may have families and individuals standing on them, that all the checks that are required to take place to ensure they're made correctly and safely actually are being done. Without these checks, without their validation, we are very vulnerable in terms of knowing that these things have been made correctly. So in terms of the Building Safety Act and ensuring the safety of the product, it's absolutely essential that we have these checks and things in place, and that we have some accountabilities to the people who are doing those checks. We have the controls in place, that the balcony is being made as we design it, using the processes that we've developed to ensure that they're being done correctly.
So you're getting the design which has been done, ensuring that that's actually what is delivered, and that that can seamless accountability stage by stage.
Absolutely.
All the way through that process. So the principles ultimately is driving life safety, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about how do we ensure that only competent people and trained people are using it and making the checks at the right stages, and talk us a little bit through that process, Matt.
Yeah, sure. So as a business, we identified fairly early on that just having an app with a load of questions is quite rudimental, really. No, it doesn't actually prove anything. So we want to ensure that the people who are doing those checks and doing the work are competent and have the right training. So within Sapphire, we have developed a whole suite of training materials, including videos, documents, and it all feeds into what we call our learning management system, and what we call it LMS for short, so it's a little easier to say. But what that actually covers is every single element of making a balcony, making the steelwork, and actually going through the install, has a training module attached to it. So we ensure that the people who are actually doing the physical work on our products, they have actually done that training. We have full records of who's done the training. Once they've done that training, within the Passport app, they then get their own name on a drop-down to ensure that we have a record who've actually done that. And on that drop-down, they've done the training. So it's a bit of a control measure put in place, so that we don't actually have untrained people who's doing that work.
And behind the scenes, presumably there's some control measures to to monitor that and make sure that it is only those people which are doing it, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we take that very, very seriously within the business. Within my team, within the quality team, we are regularly visiting our supply chain. We're auditing them, we're monitoring what's going on and ensuring that actually what we think is happening. We're monitoring the staff that are on the production lines, that we actually recognise who they are and that they've done the training. We do regular audits of all the staff that are involved in manufacturing our balconies to make sure they actually are on the MS. And we also have, this all comes into a reporting system, which we can see on a daily basis to see who's been doing each check at each stage. And if we're seeing some names we don't recognise, or if we're seeing some anomalies, we can go and actually then follow up and see what's going on. So yeah, we take that very, very seriously, and it's a real important thing to us as a business to ensure that what we're doing is correct.
Yeah, okay. So whether this is happening in the UK, whether it's happening in Ireland, whether it's happening over in Canada or further afield in the world,
Yep.
these checks presumably are the same throughout, are they?
They are based on the same platform, depending on the actual product we're making. Some of the questions and things may be slightly different. But in essence, it is the same function, the same process, and this is globally. Our supply chain is worldwide. And we want to have the same process embedded wherever you go. And that is happening. It's working. We've been visiting suppliers overseas, all parts of the world, to make sure this is being embedded, doing the training, making sure they're doing the LMS training before they have access to passport. And that's not just the UK, as you say, it's Ireland, it's globally, it's Canada, it's anywhere anybody touches a balcony.
Yep. So talk us through an example of that. Take a stud bracket and a cast-in system. What are the kind of stages of checks during that process, and how would the passport app be interfaced with, if you like, during those different stages?
Okay, so if you look at our steelwork, which is the first thing we do in manufacturing a balcony, we start with weld checks. So in terms of our supply control, we ensure they are all accredited to EN 1090 to make sure they have the right welding processes in place. We collect all the welding certificates of the people who could do the welding, and those welders then go on to passport and have a login to passport, and only those people can. There's also LMS training around the importance of the actual welding that goes onto our product, because it's a key area. We don't want any missing welds or anything going onto our products. We have photographs taken of every single weld that goes onto any piece of steelwork that goes onto our balconies. That then is logged and recorded within a Power BI report, and is actually then independently checked by a third party to actually go through to ensure there's no missing welds. And we're actually looking at the moment in implementing AI technology to actually even prove that even further. So that's just the manufacturing side of the steelwork. We've got the assembly checks in terms of having to make sure they've got calibrated equipment, and that's being audited, and that's being checked and thoroughly validated to make sure that everything's in place there in terms of their own controls. As a supply chain business, it's really important that we have those controls in a wider area rather than just Sapphire, because everyone who actually touches that balcony or the steelwork, they have an influence on how well put together it is.
So that's an interesting partner. These welds are fundamentally creating the structure in which a balcony is taking forces back into the building. So it's life safety.
Yes.
And absolutely paramount that you get that right. So in that process, you've from what you're saying, we've got checks at a factory level, and the people doing the actual fabrication and assembly. You've then got the independent spot checks by the Sapphire quality team. And then you've got third-party checks happening on those welds, and also the introduction of AI technology to identify correct and incorrect welding and so on as well. So a very holistic view of absolutely critical component in the building.
Yes, and it's a small part of a big journey in terms of making the whole balcony, but it's absolutely critical that it's done right.
So how do we then take that information on a product level like that and then connect it together with the information on where each balcony or where each connection ends up on a building?
So this is the really interesting bit, because this is something I'm quite passionate about in terms of traceability. When you're looking at a balcony on the wall, there's so many elements that go into that balcony that you need to have a level of traceability to know what is where and who's made these things and where's our checks. So, as I said earlier, the passport checks, they're very much end to end in terms of the whole life of that balcony. And the end bit of that journey is the install side. So our installers will go through as part of the 3-stage installation checks that we do. They'll scan the QR codes on each individual balcony, which has an individual serial number. Also, the steelwork that's actually been installed into the building, they'll also have individual serial numbers and barcodes on them. And part of the process is that they actually scan the balcony, they scan each piece of steel that the balcony is going to go on, or is going on to, and that one then gets recorded and brought into our systems. So we have full traceability that we can go to any balcony on any building and say, right, I know the balcony serial number, I know the steelwork serial number, I know its location, I know when it was made, I know who welded it. I've got all the photographs, all the individual component parts, I've got the photographs of all the stages of the balcony manufacturing. All that is accessible through having this information.
So theoretically, any site manager, project manager, superintendent, whatever role they are, can go to balcony and say, well, prove to me this was done by competent people.
Yep.
If that was the question, what would be the level of information which can be demonstrated?
We can go right back to the person who welded the steelwork, each individual person who actually did each individual check through passport, through the whole balcony manufacturing, to the person who actually put that balcony on the wall, back to their training records in terms of the LMS competency checks that we do, right back to the grains of what goes into making that balcony. We can have every bit of information, all the photographs through manufacturing, all on PDF reports that are available to anybody who wants them.
So you can see not just a clear record of who's ticked off what on the building, but also what photos they took of every single piece of that process and every stage by stage controlling the passport process.
Yep, so that balcony, if we say, for example, has got 2 stubs on those holding on the wall, you're about to go to that, you're about to go to the records, you're about to see the photograph of each individual weld on each one of those stubs. That you see it, that's the level of detail we can go down to.
So regardless of whether the building is being closed up and the facade is completely covering over those connections and the balcony itself is only being seen from the aesthetic point of view, you've still got that traceability on there. That's a very interesting approach. But
totally.
What happens where you've got QR codes on, I don't know, the web of an I-beam stub, which are not very accessible or have been slightly damaged for whatever reason in the process of the anchor being cast in, for example. What is the backup? Or how are you approaching it? Is it multiple QR codes? What's the process behind that?
Yep, so we look at, obviously, the design of the stub and how it fits into the building, how it attaches to the balcony. So we specify exactly where the labels, and I'll use the word labels, need to go. There's labels on both sides of that stub, and on each of those labels there's 4 QR codes. So in total, each stub has 8 QR codes that the actual person installing the balcony can have access to. It's there to maximise the probability of them finding that QR code and almost make it impossible not to find it.
Yeah. So interesting. So moving the conversation on slightly to the manufacturing process, how does the passport app tie in with the things like the standards which they're working to and the tolerances and the operating procedures and so on? Talk us through the process of how the two interface with each other in the factory environment. Okay,
yeah, it's a good question, Nick, because we have various different types of balcony in terms of balustrade types, in terms of the way they fit onto the building. We have a lot of, obviously, the design controls and the drawing controls and the standard assembly details that are produced and actually issued to all the manufacturers. And when we build passport and we build the checks that go into place, it's not just a single set of checks that applies to every single balcony. They are adaptable and they're quite intelligent to actually have the right questions and the right checks in place depending on what type of balcony that is. So if it's, say, for example, a tie wire balcony, which has the wires going up the side of the balcony, there'll be different checks that will be asked for on that, as opposed to one just has standard stubs that go onto it. So there's a lot of intelligence built into the actual system to make sure that the questions asked and the photographs that we're demanding for are actually relevant to the type of balcony and the type of product that's going onto the building.
Back in 2006, when I joined the construction industry, pretty much all quality processes everywhere were done by paper sheets, which you could tick off, but it was hard to know whether people had actually done it at the time or just ticked it all off afterwards. Talk us through that in the passport process. Is that our process able to be skipped? Could that behaviour still happen?
No, it's impossible, because We have dependencies put into each of the screens on Passport, so you can't literally go on and skip screens. You can't skip questions or actual checkpoints within the Passport app. Also, the Passport app demands there's photographs taken each stage. You can't just get to the end of the balcony, so I'm going to go back and do all my checks now, because obviously you won't have access to take the photographs at that particular stage. So there's lots of safeguards put in place to ensure that we're doing checks at the right time, by the right people with the right competence. There's also, within our Power BI reporting that we use, we can see all this information, all the history. There's timestamps in place, and there's alarms, alerts are put up if things don't look quite right, and we can then go back and obviously chase that back. So the safeguarding is in there to make sure that the app is being used correctly.
So presumably if somebody uploaded some random photos which didn't show the welding processes, that would quite quickly be picked up by technology and by the third party and by the internal processes, will it?
Absolutely. So if someone just took a picture of a random thing rather than a weld, no, we have a number of checks that happen, including AI after that, which would then actually say, well, actually, this isn't a picture of a weld. So we'd then be able to go back, we'd know exactly who's welded that, when it was welded, who by, which manufacturer it was, and go back in there and actually identify it and make sure that we've got the right checks being done.
And would that result in it being quarantined and stopped until that was rectified?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's safeguards in place at every stage of our manufacturing processes, and then the steelwork being a very critical part of what we do, so it's essentially what holds the balcony of the building. There is a hard stop process that there's a check at the actual packing stage to make sure that if that thing they're going to put onto a pallet has actually all the checks done, it stops. And they cannot actually put that thing onto the pallet.
So how does Passport then time with the items which are life critical, are obviously the most important ones? How do they get additional checks, or how does the emphasis and priority get placed on those?
Well, obviously everything we do is risk-based, and we know essentially the most critical parts of what goes into making our product. The steel being probably the most critical, but that doesn't mean that other things aren't important as well. But yeah, I think using the welding of our steel is a good example we spoke about earlier, that we know that's naturally, that's an absolute essential part of what we do. It's the key component to making sure that those parts are safe and that ultimately our product is safe, which is why we have so many safeguards in place to make sure that the welds are good quality. We're using the right manufacturers with the welding certificates. We audit those manufacturers, but also the Passport checks and the third-party checks in place to make sure there's absolutely no chance of anything that's defective and those parts actually going to the building.
So when these processes are being applied, there may be companies, and I know the original factory set up in Winchester over a decade ago now, is obviously still part of that process, and some of the people involved are still part of the same process there as well. But what stops an element of complacency there? Are the same checks applied to somebody who's been working it for a long time versus somebody who's a new factory who's been brought on board, for example, over the one over in Vancouver where there's balconies being assembled there at the moment?
Yeah, the same regime is applicable to all of our supply chain. And you're absolutely right, some of our more established older supply chain, they've been on a bit of a journey with us. They've seen these things develop and evolve, and they've become more stringent, much tighter, more controlled. And the actual feedback we get from those suppliers is, well, this is great. This is really good. All of our supply chain have their own Power BI portals, so they can go in and see the work they've been making for us. They can see their progress. They can see the same things we see on the projects they're working on. And they welcome it because they didn't have that level of visibility before. And they from a safeguarding perspective from them as well, knowing they've got those checks in place, that their staff aren't doing things incorrectly, gives them a level of comfort to know that what we're doing feeds into what they're doing as well. In addition to that, our balcony manufacturers, we have what we call a trusted provider scheme. And this is where we grade our suppliers depending on their experience, how long they've been working for Sapphire for, the general quality of their product. And that starts at bronze when we get a brand new supplier. And these are people who have just started working for Sapphire. We've done all the pre-checks, we've done the auditing, we've done all the PQQs and everything else that goes into selecting a supplier. And they're actually starting to make things for us. At that point, we have a much greater presence in with them to do the training, the ongoing support, bring them along the journey to give them the competency and the confidence they need to achieve the next stage, which is silver, which is a more established supplier who they can stand on their own 2 feet, but we still need to give them a little bit more support and just to make sure that there's nothing slipping and that they've got any difficulties or challenges that we can help them overcome those. And then we get to our real established suppliers, the guys who've been working for us for many, many years who go on to what we call gold status. And these are our showcase suppliers. And these are the guys that we're happy to really get involved with. They'll be supporting our newer suppliers and explaining how they've overcome certain difficulties and challenges in the past. And we have a very collaborative feel amongst our supply chain. There's no element of competition between them because they all want the same common goal, which is a good, safe product that's going to be going out to our customers.
So what happens if a long-term supplier starts to decline in the performance of if they have perhaps some major changes in the people working the product and the competency isn't the same, hasn't been established for the same timescale?
We do have a process where we can demote those suppliers. So, say for example, we had a silver supplier who had some issues and had to bring on a whole load of new staff that weren't as well trained and as competent as the previous staff. We would look at that from a risk perspective and say, okay, well, we probably need to bring those back down to bronze and treat them as a new supplier. And this doesn't mean they've done anything wrong. It just means that they need a bit more support because they've had organisational changes. So we're constantly monitoring that. We look at everything on risk. As a quality team in Sapphire, we understand our supply chain is our lifeblood. So we are working with them. We're always in the visiting and just being there as a support function. We're doing our own spot checks on the balconies that are coming off the production line just to make sure there's nothing slipping and there's no quality drops. So we want to be absolutely certain and as confident as possible that everything that's leaving our suppliers is as good as it could be.
Okay, so presumably that means that if they were moved from a silver to a bronze, they then get additional checks and scrutiny and so on, do they?
So we set guidelines within the team as to our core behaviours that we need to apply to the suppliers, whether they're bronze, silver or gold. And it's around, with a new bronze supplier, there'll be far more visits into that supplier. There'll be a bit more auditing going on, more trial measures in place, more support, and they'll be visited an awful lot more frequently than, say, a real top-level gold supplier. But every supplier still gets that level of support from Sapphire in terms of supply chain management and the quality side. So although you're a gold supplier, you're top of the tree, it doesn't mean we ignore you. We're still in working with you and we're still supporting and just monitoring and making sure that things are still where they should be.
Okay, so moving the conversation onto the anchor homing and the next stages of Passport.
Yeah.
Why is anchor homing the next piece which is being worked on, and how does this make a substantial improvement to the Passport system?
Yeah, the anchor homing is, in my mind, critical for what we're doing. It's what gives us that full end-to-end traceability of any balcony that's on any building. As I explained earlier, the process is already live and embedded within our installation process that when they're actually putting the balcony onto the building, they're scanning the QR code and the serial number from the balcony, and they're scanning the QR codes and the serial numbers for the steelwork that's on the building. And that's all being homed together with the location on the building in terms of stack reference and levels, and also apartment numbers. And that gives us that full bit of information about everything that's on that balcony, on that location. Absolutely critical, because if there's ever any need to go back and actually trace back all those parts that are on that building, on that balcony, we can do that within our own reporting process. We haven't got to go and start taking things apart. We can see from our records exactly what makes up that balcony in terms of all the component parts.
For anyone who is asking about components in a building, how is the anchor homing actually advancing that process of what information they would get?
What it's doing is it's putting everything together. We have lots of individual parts that go in to produce a balcony, and historically we could give history on each individual part, but wouldn't necessarily know without taking the balcony literally off the wall which bit of steel was linked to which balcony. So the advancement here is that by linking all the component parts to that balcony at install stage, It gives us the full capability of tracing back every single thing that is actually in that balcony. So if any client was to come to us and say, right, this balcony over here on the wall that I'm pointing to now, can you tell me the balcony? Can you tell me who made it? Can you tell me what steelwork is in that balcony? Can you go back and tell me who welded those, when it was done? Historically, we could have done that by having to take things apart. Now we can actually go in and actually look within our records and look in the systems we have in place. And I can tell you in a heartbeat exactly all the information you need, plus provide reports and PDFs and photographs of every single thing that is in that balcony.
So what else is being looked at as a kind of futuristic piece which links in with this homing and the advancements to the quality process? What's next for Passport?
With all these things, it is a journey, and we're always evolving, we're always improving. As I said before, we've got life critical parts in that balcony that are absolutely no compromise. They have to be absolutely perfectly spot on, made without any compromise whatsoever. Every element in this balcony has an importance to it. So we're looking at how do we continually ensure that's being met. So we're looking at obviously how do we use technology in doing this. We're doing a lot more work now involving AI in terms of the checks and the processes in place. Take away a lot of the human element so that humans can make mistakes. Technology generally doesn't. And that's where we're looking to see move this forward and embracing that to make this what is already an amazing system in terms of having the controls in place to make it even better as we move forward over the coming.
With innovation around this quality control process and so on, is the customer's feedback that this is really setting Sapphire apart from the rest of the industry, or is this Sapphire playing catch up with the industry?
Oh no, without doubt, the feedback we get from clients, the feedback we get from our supply chain partners, our installation teams is wow. The journey Passport has been on from when we first looked at it all those years ago, it is a very simple rudimental checking tool to where it is now to give us level traceability that we want to have, our clients want to have. It's something that they've never had before. And when you present this to clients, particularly clients who have never kind of had this level of information for it blows them away. And the feedback we get is, yeah, this is something that sets you apart from the rest of the industry in this sort of level quality control that you've got in place.
So this is really streamlining the balcony journey through innovation, is it?
Absolutely. We're using innovation, we're using technology, and it gives everybody who's involved in the manufacture or the purchasing of the balcony that kind of peace of mind that the level controls in place are second to none. Now this is industry leading. There's no question about it. We are leading the way on what we're doing with this, and as the market keeps up, we need to keep moving forward, and that's what we endeavoured to do. And as a business, we're passionate to keep doing that. Now, it needs to be clear, this is something that's not easy. This is something that's not cheap. But we, as a business, as Sapphire, we understand how critical it is in the direction of the business. It's something that is absolutely essential in moving us forward and taking the industry forward in the next level of safeguarding and safety in buildings and making sure that those checks and all the processes are really, really tightly controlled. Yeah, so the work we're doing on Passport, it really is, if you go back to our core beliefs as a business, is streamline that balcony journey. And we're using innovation. As we say as a business, we're quite passionate about this to actually prosper the community. It's really important to us that we're taking those steps and those measures and embarking on that journey.
So Matt, in conclusion, what three things would you say have been absolutely critical to the success and the future success of Passport?
Three things. Okay, usability. Although it's a lot going on with this app, it's actually quite easy for people to use. It's not something that people dread using, and we're getting lots of pushback from the fight. So there's that side of things. The traceability, as we said earlier in our discussion, the traceability we can offer to our clients and ourselves is second to none. We can go down to the grains of what goes into everything that goes on with our products. And accountability, it's making sure that the people who are using this product, they're fully trained, they're competent, and they're signing their name to say, I've done this correctly and I've done this to the best quality possible.
Usability, accountability and traceability, three fundamental things for life safety. And appreciate your time in talking this through to us. I find it inspiring that so much money and effort is being poured into something which is really taking the whole industry forward in the direction which is aligned with the new whole building safety regime, but also with where customers thinking and directionally the industry at large needs to go.
Absolutely. We just want to take the market forward.
Thank you, Matt, for sharing your insightful expertise on the golden thread and how that integrates from a manufacturing level in the construction industry. Thank you for everyone who's joined us as viewers as we've explored the golden thread and look at these constructive conversations in the ResiBuild podcast. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you in the next one.